It started like so many moments in fandom culture do, quietly at first, then all at once. A few comments here, a trending hashtag there, whispers turning into loud, undeniable noise. Some fans began insisting that Jimin should distance himself from Jungkook. The reasons? Complicated, emotional, and in many ways, deeply revealing. Not just about them, but about fandom itself. But here's where the story takes a turn that no one expected, or maybe, if you've been paying attention long enough, one that feels completely inevitable. Because instead of pulling away, Jungkook did the opposite. He stayed, closer than ever. And that single decision, silent, unannounced, but incredibly visible, sparked one of the most fascinating dynamics fans have seen in years. Why would he do that? What was he trying to say without saying anything at all? And more importantly, what does it reveal about their bond? If you followed BTS even casually, you already know that the relationship between Jimin and Jungkook has always been something special. Not necessarily in the way some fans dramatize it, but in a way that feels grounded, human, and consistently genuine. From early debut days to global superstardom, their interactions have carried a certain ease, like two people who don't need to perform closeness because it already exists. But fame changes everything, doesn't it? Or at least it tests everything. As BTS grew into a global phenomenon, every glance, every laugh, every shared moment between Jimin and Jungkook began to carry weight. Fans dissected their interactions, slowed down clips, built narratives. Some saw brotherhood, others saw something deeper, and some, perhaps overwhelmed by the intensity of it all, started drawing lines where none were clearly defined. That's where the tension began. The idea that one of them should stay away didn't come from a single source. It came from a mix of protective instincts, misunderstandings, and sometimes the dangerous illusion that fans fully understand the personal dynamics of the people they admire. But do we really? Think about that for a moment. How much of what we believe about celebrities is based on reality, and how much is shaped by our own interpretations? Because while fans were debating, analyzing, and even arguing, something else was happening quietly in the background. Jungkook wasn't reacting publicly. He wasn't addressing the noise. He wasn't making statements or drawing boundaries in front of cameras. Instead, he did something far more powerful. He showed up, again and again. Moments began to surface, small at first, then impossible to ignore. A glance that lingered a little longer. A smile that felt more personal than performative. A natural gravitation toward Jimin in group settings, as if proximity itself was a form of reassurance. Was it intentional? Or was it simply instinct? That's the question that keeps pulling people deeper into the story. Because if Jungkook was aware of the narrative, and it's hard to imagine he wasn't, then choosing to stay close becomes more than just a casual decision. It becomes a statement. Not loud, not confrontational, but clear. And maybe that's what makes it so powerful. In a world where everything is often overexplained, overshared, and overanalyzed, there's something incredibly compelling about actions that speak without words. It raises another question. What does loyalty look like when it's not performed for an audience? For Jungkook, it seems to look like consistency. It looks like refusing to let external noise dictate internal relationships. It looks like choosing presence over distance. And that choice, simple as it may seem, challenges a deeper issue within fandom culture. Because when fans say stay away, what are they really asking for? Are they protecting someone? Are they projecting their own fears? Or are they trying to control a narrative that was never theirs to control in the first place? This is where things get uncomfortable, but also honest. Fandom is built on connection, but sometimes that connection blurs into entitlement. The feeling that because we support, love, and invest emotionally, we have a say in personal dynamics. But do we? Jimin and Jungkook have spent years building a bond that predates much of the global attention they receive now. They've trained together, struggled together, succeeded together. They've seen each other at their lowest and highest points. That kind of history doesn't disappear because of online discourse. If anything, it becomes stronger under pressure. And maybe that's exactly what we're witnessing. A bond being tested, not by internal conflict, but by external expectations. And instead of breaking, it's holding steady. There's a quiet confidence in that, a kind of unspoken understanding that doesn't need validation from anyone else. But let's not ignore the other side of this conversation, because for some fans, the concern isn't about control, it's about care. There are those who genuinely worry about how public scrutiny affects both Jimin and Jungkook. The constant analysis, the shipping culture, the pressure, it can be overwhelming. So when they say, stay away, it might come from a place of wanting to protect. But even then, the question remains, is distance really protection? Or is it just avoidance? Because if two people find comfort in each other, separating them might do more harm than good. And Jungkook's actions seem to suggest that he understands this. That whatever the world is saying, whatever narratives are being pushed, the reality of his connection with Jimin matters more. There's something quietly rebellious about that. Not in a dramatic, headline-making way, but in a deeply human one. It's the kind of rebellion that says, I know what this is, even if you don't. And maybe that's what resonates so strongly with fans who see their bond as genuine. Because in a world full of curated images and controlled narratives, authenticity stands out. It's rare, it's powerful, and it's often misunderstood. Let's be real for a second. If Jungkook had actually distanced himself, what would fans say? Some would call it maturity. Others would call it forced. Some would see it as growth. Others would see it as loss. No matter what he chose, there would be interpretation. So instead, he chose something else. He chose consistency. And consistency, in a space filled with constant change, is one of the strongest messages anyone can send. It says, this hasn't changed. It says, this still matters. It says, I'm not going anywhere. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Because while Jungkook's actions are being analyzed, what about Jimin? How does he respond to all of this? If you look closely, you'll notice something subtle but important. He doesn't push away. He doesn't create distance. He meets Jungkook where he is. There's a mutual understanding there, something balanced, something unspoken, something that doesn't need to be explained to feel real. And maybe that's the key to everything. Because relationships, whether friendships, partnerships, or something in between, aren't defined by outside voices. They're defined by the people inside them. And from what we can see, Jimin and Jungkook are still very much inside their own world, navigating it on their own terms. So, what does this mean for fans? That's the bigger question. Because stories like this don't just reflect the people involved, they reflect the audience watching them. It challenges us to think about how we engage with the lives of public figures. Are we observing? Or are we interfering? Are we supporting? Or are we shaping narratives that don't belong to us? And most importantly, are we listening to what's actually being shown, or just what we expect to see? Jungkook staying close to Jimin isn't just a moment. It's a message. Not one that's spoken, but one that's lived. And maybe that's why it's so impactful. Because in the end, actions are harder to misinterpret than words. They're harder to twist, harder to deny. They just are. And what we're seeing is two people who, despite everything, continue to choose each other's presence. Not because they have to, but because they want to. That distinction matters. A lot. So the next time you see a clip, a photo, or a moment between Jimin and Jungkook, ask yourself something simple. Are you watching with curiosity? Or are you watching with expectation? Because the answer to that question might change everything about how you see them. And maybe, just maybe, it will remind you that some connections don't need to be explained to be understood. They just need to be respected. If you made it this far, you're clearly invested in stories like this, the kind that go beyond headlines and dive into the meaning behind the moments. So tell me, what do you think? Is Jungkook's decision a quiet act of loyalty, or something even deeper? Drop your thoughts below. Let's talk about it. And if you want more stories that break down the real emotions behind your favorite idols, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.